The following program contains scenes and language of a frank and explicit nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Film Jitsu, the podcast that wields films like deadly weapons. We are your hosts. I am Mike.
And I am Jay.
On this week's episode of Film Jitsu, we get the most Gutenberg-y we've ever gotten, as Jason has to watch, thanks to a roll of the dice, Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol. Because once you've had 3 police academies, why stop there? We're going to do our bottom 5 movie cops. We'll give you some staff picks before Jason reveals what we have in store for our next episode of Film Jitsu. But before all that, I guess roll a trailer?
Those talented graduates are back in Police Academy.
Oh! I want to welcome all of you to
Citizens on Patrol.
Citizens on Patrol.
The Police Academy has offered to train you citizens
You just don't think I'm fast enough anymore, do you?
to better protect yourselves.
Do we get to pack heat?
Attention all cars, attention all cars.
Mahoney,
Gee, I love saying that.
Jones, Hightower, Sweet Chud, Zed, and Tackleberry.
Good idea.
Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol.
Now be careful, because a 44 Magnum has quite a kick.
See it in your neighborhood while you still have one.
Jason, the Police Academy movies came out in the 1980s when we were all having a big laugh with the police. Here we are in a more modern time when maybe the police aren't quite as funny, and I wonder if we're going to talk about that at all. But what I do know is that the Police Academy movies, by my recollection, were a real laugh riot. They were real Bobcat Goldthwait-y, all kinds of Michael Winslow making all kinds of bells and whistles and what have you.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure if I stop to think about it, probably a lot more homophobia than anybody's comfortable with. But
Sure.
I'm not the one who has to recall because you had the displeasure of sitting down and watching the movie. So
Yeah.
do tell, how does Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol, look in the light of day?
You know, Police Academy 4, I remember as being a lot better than it actually is. In fact, it is a really, really bad movie. A startlingly bad, ill-plotted mess of a movie. It takes the same exact formula as the preceding 3 movies and regurgitates that. Somehow, Steve Gutenberg continued to be in these movies even this far along. Although I think with each movie, as you get further along, and he's game, by the way, he is game. He's still doing the same exact shtick, which is a little surprising because he only has one note as an actor. It's this sort of wry,
Diet Bill Murray. He's Diet Bill Murray.
Well, I guess that would be true. He definitely doesn't have anywhere near the cynicism or the sort of darkness that Bill Murray can conjure. But Gutenberg is he was here and he was game for it, which is surprising.
Sure.
But he was in a limited capacity, and I think over those movies, as you go from 2 to 3, he's in a smaller and smaller capacity, and it becomes more and more of an ensemble piece to the point where it's really just a Saturday Night Live episode. I mean, it's an hour and a half long, and it's a series of skits with a bunch of familiar characters. And you're like, oh, Michael Winslow is going to come out and do kung fu noises again, or Leslie Easterbrook's going to jump out of the water and have a wet t-shirt and everybody's going to clap. You know, I mean, like, it was the same. It was startling to me just how much it was the same thing over and over again. But the central concept here was actually kind of interesting and moved the plot in a curious way. So like the actual, and I'm dead serious about that. I actually thought, as bad as this movie is, the concept was a neat one, but it was like this time around, it's the same old Police Academy crew, but they're tasked with Commandant Lassard's latest brain fart, which is a neighborhood patrol campaign that'll train ordinary people into becoming police. It's called Citizens on Patrol. Get it? Cop.
I get it.
Cop.
Yeah.
Oh.
Citizens on Patrol. Look at that.
And soon enough, Mahoney and company and some new cadets, David Spade in his film debut, Brian Backer, who was Mark Ratner from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Billy Bird, who's that veteran TV and movie actress who to me was always the golden girl that never was. She was best known to me as Miss Cassidy in the mid-'80s sitcom Benson, starring Robert Guillaume, tagging along as an intrepid news reporter and Mahoney's sort of love interest, who it's later revealed is also a vintage biplane pilot.
Like you do.
Like one does. It's none other than a pre-Basic Instinct Sharon Stone. So I know.
How does Sharon Stone keep coming into your film Jitsu life over and over and over again?
It's not a bad thing. I'm not going to complain
It's
about
not.
it. I actually
It's
really
not.
like her.
I know.
Well, anyway, together, the cops and the COPS cops, the Citizen on Patrol, endure the hazing of old nemesis Captain Harris and his idiot henchman Proctor, who desperately want the Citizens on Patrol program to fail and reveal Lassard and crew as frauds or whatever. Though Harris is always the bad guy, he seems to have like no motivation beyond just hating the core cast of characters since movie one and wanting to see them as embarrassed as he always ends up. And when the cops blow an undercover sting operation that was months in the making by storming a warehouse filled with stolen goods, Harris gets his chance to bury his enemies. But all of it's undone by the wackiest third act I think I've ever seen. It's a jailbreak that started by Randall Tex Cobb. Remember him from Raising Arizona?
Yeah.
He's the one that was riding the motorcycle and was just absolutely horrifying. Anyway.
Killing bunnies and everything.
So Randall Tex Cobb is in jail and he plays a game of Simon Says with Proctor that ends up freeing a ninja clan and other assorted bad guys that need to be rounded up by the heroes. And these nefarious types end up in a bank robbery that's thwarted by Tackleberry and Mrs. Feldman, the old lady played by Billy Bird. They end up on a tall ship where Jones, Michael Winslow, and Callahan, that's Leslie Easterbrook, use the slowest kung fu moves in history to stop the ninjas. These ninjas just basically stand around while Winslow makes kung fu noises and kicks them in the head. And then incredibly, there's a hot air balloon race where the thieves get into hot air balloons and they get chased by the cops in biplanes. I mean,
the old police biplane squad there, they got kicking around.
There's only one way to do this, and it's up to me! Take over!
He was talking to you! Is it coming back? Bring some beer!
It was clearly the 80s.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you talk about it being clearly the 80s, because a lot of this stuff sounds to me like it could only exist in the year 1987.
There's this great skateboarding video, like right in the middle of this movie for no reason. It's just, and there's Tony Hawk is in it. I thought it looked to me like Tony Hawk was actually doing some of the skateboard stunts for David Spade. But Spade was totally riding. Spade and Brian Backer are doing their own skateboarding for a large portion of it. And it was like, oh, all right, that's kind of neat.
Unit 6 to Captain Harris. We've got him at the end of the alley.
I got you now.
You hold him right there. We're coming. Copeland, have you got him?
You know, I think our bottom 5 speaks a lot to this, so I won't go into it too much. But wow, do police have a bad rep in cinema? You know what I mean? Like, Scene is so inept, so dunderheaded, so clueless.
Well, and maybe that's because this was also a time when who are the other cops that we're seeing? We're seeing a lot of 80s action movie cops at the time.
Yes.
So we're seeing the Cobras. We're seeing the McClanes.
Yeah.
We're seeing all of these big action badass sunglasses, motorcycle cop hero types.
Rule breaking.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so this being almost a departure from that, I don't know if I'm ready to say that, boy, America sure needed funny cops again come 1980, whatever the first movie came out is. I don't know. But it is a little bit of a foil to the Cobra thing.
In the 80s, maybe it might have been.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You have these cops wearing their blue uniforms, and they're kind of these doofy, bumble around kind of knuckleheads. I can see maybe having space for that in the time when really all you're getting is these badass rule breakers who are more criminal than cop themselves.
Yeah, that's definitely carried over from the 70s. Those 70s cop
and
movies
the
with like
Serpicos
Popeye
and
Doyle and stuff like that. Like those were the rule breakers that would run down the bad guy, right? And it was Dirty Harry. You know what I mean? Like those types of things.
Exactly.
So I mean,
and then by the end of the decade, we come out with almost a perfect blend of the two when we get into the Lethal Weapons, where we have these badass tough guy cops who are also kind of funny and goofy, and that's the direction that
48 Hours
exactly,
and Axel Foley from Beverly Hills Cop movies and stuff like that. I think there's a long tradition of making fun of the police. Like it seems like using them as the butt of the joke is really something that has a lot of cinematic tradition to it. And I don't know if we want to get too much into quote unquote liberal Hollywood and this sort of that whole thing. I personally don't really want to get too much into that, but I feel as though the Police Academy movies were picking up on a tradition of just straight freaking ridicule, but with no real basis at all in any world of fact. This thing is a cartoon that is completely adolescent in nature. This is the death of humor right here. Like there's zero respect for police work, even though they're the good guys, and even though their values are maybe decent, their morality is maybe decent.
I'd now like to discuss with you something that'll be vital for you to know when you're out there on the job as a police officer. And that's the correct way on how to eat a donut. A donut!
Attention! Captain Harris?
From this moment on, anyone who misplaces their canister of mace will be reprimanded and fined. Is that clear?
Yes, sir!
I find what's interesting about Captain Harris, too, we should talk a little bit about him. He's like the Dolores Umbridge of the Police Academy movies, if you think about it. Yeah. He exists as the main bad guy even more than the villains of the third act, right? Like if you're having a central dramatic structure to this movie, if there is one, right?
Yeah.
It's Harris versus Lassard, Harris versus Gutenberg, right? Like Gutenberg's primary role in this movie is to show up every 10 minutes and sass Captain Harris and then sort of look at him, with a kind of crooked smile and like sad puppy dog eyes and then walk away. Like that's it. Harris, it's surprising, as played by G.W. Bailey, who's not a young man in this. It seems like it was a very physical role. There was just a lot of like physical comedy. At one point he ends up in like rapids and he's getting pulled away. He and his second in command there, Proctor, which is they named the character Proctor. I mean, of course they do. So it's all very juvenile at the end of the day. It's all very silly. The story doesn't make any sense. The jokes are very flat. They even recycled the old joke about a gay club that they wander into accidentally all the time. And then there's like always a bunch of gay dudes in leather, with like biker outfits or whatever. And there's always this piece of music that goes da 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 da. And I remember growing up as a kid and always going da 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 da, not really understanding the context or anything. But I think that a joke like that gets replayed over and over and over again and tries to land it by this fourth movie really does seem incredibly tired. And what I found interesting in watching it 30 some odd years later is this is a movie that I did watch quite a bit when I was a kid. I watched the first 4 Police Academy movies quite a bit. And I think in particular, number 2 and number 4. I don't know if there's some sort of Star Trek rationale where only the even movies are the good ones or whatever. It's sort of the same for Police Academy. I don't know if that's true, but I really liked 2 and 4. I loved Bobcat Goldthwait's Zed character in these movies. And
everybody did.
Oh, did they? Yeah, I thought
everybody
it was super
did.
funny.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I have a similar experience to you growing up. I remember watching these. I remember even more fondly my kid brothers who were 5 years younger than me watching them and really going for them. Because like you said, they're cartoons.
Yeah.
It was almost the 80s ski movie, but with police,
Yeah.
And just another
like Porky's,
recycled version of that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Meatballs and all of those kind of things.
Yeah. That's really what it was.
And so you use the word juvenile over and over again. And I think that's because I remember juveniles enjoying the movie so much. So maybe that's what the target audience for these movies are. I guess I have to ask, here you are. And I think you're right. We don't want to get too in the weeds on this stuff just because I'm not sure we're the right podcast for that. But here we are today. And I think that the police aren't funny anymore. I don't know that you would or could or should make this kind of movie today, but I'm curious how watching this movie, in our modern time affected your enjoyment of it one way or the other.
It's puerile and idiotic to an adult's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It's so idiotic, Mike, that it distances itself from reality. These aren't real police. So it's hard to kind of look at it and think, oh, these are somehow related to the police who are murdering people on the streets and getting away with it or whatever.
Right.
It was as if aliens were instructed to make a cop movie, based on what they've picked up from interstellar space. And they were like, oh yes, clearly this is what we would present. It was just like, it does not base itself in reality when the commandant of the police academy is giving fish bowls with goldfish in them to the other commandants from countries all over the world. And that's a gag,
Right.
It's just,
right.
It's all so dumb.
Do you think kids would still enjoy this?
I think they might. I was thinking about it. It's funny. Nostalgia plays such a huge role in how we remember movies as good or bad or whatever. And I was thinking about the movie Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks, which was a movie that he made very early in his career that I always had very, very positive feelings about, that I really enjoyed. And I went to watch Bachelor Party maybe 5 years ago. It was considered one of my favorite comedies just in my mind, but I hadn't watched it in a while. Threw it on, didn't make it through it, and actually got rid of my DVD copy. It was just lousy.
You purged it from your life.
I would summarize the whole experience of watching this movie again as making contact with an old friend from grade school.
Yeah.
And then finding out that all of the things that were funny about that friend are now no longer all that funny.
So Police Academy 4 is like that Facebook struggle where you're like, do I accept the friend request from this kid I went to junior high with? Or is he possibly a fucking nightmare and I don't want him anywhere near my life?
Police Academy 4, steeped in nostalgia, doesn't look as good 35 years later, has nothing to do with our current situation with the police. It's so far removed from any of that I honestly can't say that has any effect. And yes, I would say children may still watch this, especially probably early adolescence, if only for that Leslie Easterbrook popping out of water in the wet t-shirt shot. Well, for this episode, we decided to do bottom 5 cops. My approach this time around was not to simply discuss bad cops in movies. That just seemed way too challenging for a ranking, as there are just so many. And, you know, as we've discussed in this climate of Blue Lives Matter versus the mass reported abuse of power and cowardice of some police, I didn't want to go in depth of my personal feelings about the badge. So instead, I went the way of embarrassingly stupid police, the kinds of cops that are just so incredibly inept, they seem like they might exist alongside the idiots from Police Academy. Essentially, my list of bottom 5 cops mostly doesn't deal with evil people. It counts off most inept, petty, and stupid police this side of Commandant Lassard's academy. What was your take here? And what is your number 5?
I did something kind of similar. I thought about the different ways that cops are presented in movies and tried to come up with one pick for sort of each of those archetypes.
Oh, okay.
And so
got it. Okay.
For my number 5, I'm going with the idiot cop. And my pick for this is Officer Miglioriti from the 1976 movie The Little Girl Who Lived Down the Lane, starring a 13-year-old
Jodie Foster. And Martin Sheen, right? This is the Martin Sheen? That's
right.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Martin Sheen, who plays the town's pedophile that, like, everybody knows, like, oh, you got to stay away from him. He's a total perv. And, like, everybody in town is just kind of openly cool with, he's just a perv. You got to leave him alone, which I don't know what fucking town that is, but it's the same town that is policed by this cop that keeps popping by the house. Jodie Foster plays this little girl. It's like a Pippi Longstocking situation. There is no parent in the house. It's just her in this big New England house. And she keeps convincing everybody that her father's around here somewhere. And this cop, this well-meaning cop, shows up, and this 13-year-old is like, nah, he's upstairs. Yeah, he's taking a nap. Yeah, he's busy. And this guy's like, yeah, okay, I'll come back later. And you're sitting here thinking, like, how is anybody falling for this?
Yeah.
How is an officer of the law not being like, yes, 13-year-old child, but I would like to see the adult in the house. This culminates, and I shit you not, in the most shockingly ludicrous Mrs. Doubtfire move, where this teenager that Jodie Foster has befriended puts on like an old man disguise, like Johnny Knoxville putting on the old man makeup in a Jackass movie, and he comes down the stairs and he's like, "Pip, pip, I say," and this cop totally buys it. It's like, so there's the dad, I guess.
Oh man,
it is so bad. It's really worth watching for the Martin Sheen performance, because this is young Martin Sheen, and so he plays a villain in it. He's really, and Jodie Foster as a 13-year-old is mind blowing. But Officer Miglioriti as the local Italian cop, which they point out a couple of times, who can't talk his way around a 13-year-old or a teenager in a rubber mask, I think clearly for me qualifies as a bottom 5 cop, and my representative of the idiot cop.
That's a great
type.
one. Yeah. Just keeping on the theme with idiot cops, my number 5 is Deputy Hank Halick from the 1985 comedy Moving Violations. And while the cop in this somewhat obscure movie is crooked as a dog's hind leg, it's not the deputy here and his plan to impound and sell cars of some of the worst drivers ever that has me popping him onto my list at number 5. No, it's that this silly, petty, and weird deputy has one of the most punchable faces in all of cinema. He's played by James Keach, who's the brother of similarly punchably faced Stacy Keach, who himself was best known as Detective Mike Hammer. But he's the main bad guy in Moving Violations, and he's even more irritating than Dan Murray, who is the brother of Bill Murray, who inexplicably is the lead in this sort of Police Academy style comedy. But James Keach, he's pretty memorable as he inflicts drivers' education torment on this colorful group of flunkies, which include an early career turn by Jennifer Tilly, who looked mighty lovely in this movie. So she's pretty damn funny. And then this cop character is also getting it on with his tough as nails partner, played by Lisa Hart Carroll. He's annoying. He's smarmy. He's just got that typical 80s villain sneer, and he's a cop.
Yeah.
So this is a dumb movie that tries to make hay out of Bill Murray's popularity by getting his younger brother to play a variation of him. But, I have to admit, I still really like it, and it's painfully, wonderfully 80s title theme song.
I've never even...
You never even heard of it? Oh, it's so much fun to watch. It's tough to find. But let's just say that when you mention this bottom 5 cops list, this guy was one of the first. I mean, he's a dirty cop, but it's more just his 80s punchability.
Well, speaking of punchable 80s cops, the first one that popped to mind for me was my number 4, the asshole cop.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that we are offered no better version of the asshole cop than perhaps Sheriff Teasel from 1982's First Blood, played by the always amazing Brian Dennehy.
Such a great choice.
You visiting somebody around here? Wearing that flag on that jacket, looking the way you do. You're asking for trouble around here, friend. Headed north or south?
North.
Now jump in. I'll make sure you head in the right direction, huh?
He's the cop that pushed Rambo just a little too hard.
Yeah.
Drives him to the edge of town, tells him to get a haircut and a shower.
Yep.
Arrests Rambo on nothing. They take him back to the prison. They kind of rough him up a little bit. The other cops in town are assholes. They send Rambo into a rage.
Yeah.
He starts having flashbacks of Vietnam, decides that he's been pushed as far as he's going to be pushed. And the next thing you know, the sheriff is chasing Rambo through the wilderness and blowing up the town, all because he's such a fucking egotistical asshole that he can't back down to this guy who he's a soldier and he served his country and he came back. The movie has a lot to say about Vietnam and all of that, but cinema offers us a lot of asshole cops, this power hungry, small town piece of shit.
Yeah.
And I think there's no better example. Brian Dennehy is a serious fucking actor who I think took what could have been a very dumb movie and elevated it by taking the role of... I've actually read the novel. The Rambo novel is a pretty decent read. And I think by having a real legit powerhouse actor in this role, he goes from being just sort of a villain to being an all-time asshole.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And so that's my representative for the asshole, especially the small town asshole cop, which we get a lot of in cinema, but I don't think anybody ever did it better than he did.
I don't know. Funny enough, my number 4 is also an asshole cop, but it would be none other than Buford T. Justice from Smokey and the Bandit, Jackie Gleason's classic. I mean, as soon as you mentioned this list, he was the first thing I thought of, and he is a total asshole, right?
Yeah.
I just immediately heard the voice, that Louisiana kind of drawl of Jackie Gleason, in a role that would define him to our generation. Our parents' generation knew him as Ralph Cramden from The Honeymooners and stuff. But for us, it was pretty much, we would think of Buford T. Justice.
I saw it, you son-bitch! You did that on purpose! You gonna wait till you agree! I got the evidence! Put the evidence in the car! But Daddy... Put the evidence in the car! I gotta barbecue your ass in molasses!
Burt Reynolds has, he's got a buddy named Snowman that's driving a truck full of Coors. And weirdly, Coors was illegal in several states. And so this was contraband. So that's what they were trying to pursue. And Bandit, Burt Reynolds' character, it runs interference and sort of gets the law to follow him and keeps it off the truck. And then the rest of the movie is a chase where he just doesn't care about jurisdiction. He doesn't care about his responsibilities as an officer. Everything is personal, and he just follows him across 20 states as his car just gets picked to pieces. And that's how you visually see just how impossibly inept Buford T. Justice is.
Yeah, he's kind of the fun version of Sheriff Cecil,
yes,
right?
He's that was really where my list
the madcap one.
Most of my list lives on the fun because that's what Police Academy, so I just kind of stayed away from the other stuff.
Well, I definitely didn't stay away from the other stuff with my next pick, The Corrupt Cop.
Yeah.
Last week we name dropped Denzel Washington in Training Day. Obviously, he won the Academy Award for it. I think the argument could be made then that he is the corruptiest cop in all of cinema, perhaps. But I think he pales in comparison to a character that, for me, epitomizes the corrupt movie cop. And that's Gary Oldman's DEA agent, Norman Stansfield in Leon the Professional.
Yeah. Oh.
This dude is insane. He's a violent, raging cokehead who murders a little girl's family and then spends the whole movie coming after the little girl.
I like these calm little moments before the storm. It reminds me of Beethoven. Can you hear it? It's like when you put your head to the grass, you can hear it growing. You can hear the insects. Do you like Beethoven? Couldn't really say. I'm gonna play you some.
This is an all-time Gary Oldman performance.
Oh, for sure.
It's so big and I mean, it's Gary Oldman on coke the whole time. It might even be an all-time movie villain performance.
It is.
Never mind just the cop thing. This is a bad man.
Yeah.
He's not even hiding that he's corrupt.
No, not even a little bit.
He's just doing what he wants in full view of everyone, and he has the power to get away with it. So for me, this is probably my least fun pick.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's just a nasty son of a bitch. And so I didn't think I could go through a list of bad cops without including this guy in it. So that's my representative for the corrupt cop.
He's absolutely an essential if you're going to make a list like this and take the kind of approach you did with archetypes and stuff. Professional's one of my all-time favorites, at least top 15 movies. And the very ending of that film was Jean Reno when he kind of gets his revenge, so to speak, but it comes at a very big cost, let's just say.
Yeah.
That sequence really is so incredibly emotional yet satisfying, enormously satisfying. And it's very difficult to have a villain that wretched and that awful and then feel satisfied when they get theirs, kind of like the end of Die Hard when he pulls the watch and falls when
get off my plane, Harrison Ford.
Exactly, which was Gary Oldman in that one too, which is funny.
Yeah, that's right.
Gary Oldman has played some phenomenal villains over the years. If you think of like Zorg from The Fifth Element as well, I mean, just some awesome villain. But I do think that this one is maybe a high point in his career, which is funny because it kind of came at the low point of his career. But yeah, awesome stuff. Well, mine is a corrupt cop as well in the number 3. So we seem to be,
good.
I seem to be actually following yours, but the lighter version, because mine is Lieutenant Lois Einhorn / Ray Finkel from Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.
No.
What's it say about the police profession when the writers of Ace Ventura: Pet Detective thought that the best, most plausible destination for disgraced ex-Miami Dolphins kicker Ray Finkel was to change genders and, surprise, become a lieutenant in the Miami police force? Like, I always enjoyed this comedy as it largely deals in absurdity that's winningly wrangled by the human cartoon that is Jim Carrey. But one thing that always struck me as too wild was the twist that Einhorn is Finkel.
Einhorn is Finkel. Finkel is Einhorn. I think that the twist when I was a kid, when I was watching it, I almost didn't get it.
Oh yeah,
because I was like, "Well, wait,
you were younger
what do you mean?"
Because that's true. Yeah,
yeah, and so you know, it was a female actress playing Einhorn.
Right.
So there was almost this physical comedy gag where Finkel was this butch, masculine football player, and now there's a very, like, clearly a different human. Right.
My whole problem with the movie was the twist, because I couldn't understand how a washed up NFL kicker becomes a high ranking police officer. like in the intervening decade or so.
That was your problem with Ace Ventura.
It was.
That was the part
I'm dead serious. Yeah. Like, and he changes gender to boot, like, which was kind of like your thing where you were confused by it. But I'm just thinking, like, her ability to rise in the ranks despite clearly being next level deranged was just a bridge too far for me to cross, like, when I was watching this. And she, like, abuses her power, pins the whole thing on Ace. You know what I mean? And look, this movie now is viewed through a lens of being really, like, insensitive toward
I think it's a fair it's a fair criticism.
I don't, because it was pretty much well, specifically the sequence where Jim Carrey's character discovers,
it's like sobbing in the shower, and
because it's all directly parodying The Crying Game, to the point where The Crying Game the song is playing over the sequence. It's 100% making fun of that sequence, but amping it up a level, because it's a stupid fucking sequence in a stupid fucking movie that has
you
more.
Hate The Crying Game
it has
so
more
bad.
It has more transphobia in it than anything in Ace Ventura. Ace Ventura was a parody of it, and it uses the same twist. And whether you like that twist or not, I get it.
No, and I think you're right. I mean, I think that a lot of people,
very unfair treatment.
There was no way that the audience for Ace Ventura was going to get that scene was parodying The Crying Game.
How couldn't they get it?
It's just a weird reference.
It literally is playing it over the scene. It's the same scene.
Yeah.
So if if it didn't fly as a joke,
I would say that a lot of people that view that scene the way that it is often criticized, and I can understand why. I think that a very small portion of that viewing audience knows that it's a reference to The Crying Game.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I didn't know that. You know what I mean? And I don't know that how many people were enjoying Ace Ventura when it came out, and also really could tell you that was from The Crying Game. And I still think a lot of people probably don't know that that's a reference to The Crying Game. I don't think that a lot of people realize that. And so I think they see the scene and it looks just patently homophobic or transphobic. Yeah. And I think that it is, but not for the reason that people think that it is. It is because The Crying Game is.
Yes, right? Exactly. That's correct. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I guess my thing is that this movie gets the blame for a lot of shit that another movie didn't get any blame for, but got a lot of accolades for. And I call bullshit on that.
Alrighty then.
My next bad cop here, as I get down into my number 2 spot, it seems like I had to have somewhere on here the evil prison guard, the ruthless, terrible, evil prison guard. And so for me, I think look no further than Clancy Brown as the detestable Captain Hadley in Frank Darabont's 1994 prison classic, The Shawshank Redemption. There might not be a character anywhere on film easier to hate than Captain Hadley. He's the sadistic, nasty thug that Warden Norton uses as his muscle to hurt other people while hiding behind his Bible. What is Warden Norton says he believes in? What? The Bible and discipline, right? And what he means by discipline is Captain Hadley will beat you to death and I will turn a blind eye to it. And Hadley does that. He gets his jollies on beating prisoners. He beats a prisoner to death. He straight up murders people. He's the kind of character that you spend the whole movie wanting to punch in the face. And again, he gets his comeuppance in the end, but not in a way that is especially satisfying. Not so much in the same way that Warden Norton, who eats a bullet rather than face the consequences. Even that you feel like, well, he took the coward's way out. You know, I really would have liked to see him get his. Hadley, you know, is going to end up in the prison with the prisoners that he's been abusing so long. So he does get his comeuppance in a way, But for me, the evil prison guard is, I think, perfectly epitomized by Clancy Brown in that performance.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody that would be better than that particular. Yeah, for sure.
I thought a little bit about The Green Mile.
Same.
Another Stephen King.
When you first started
Stephen
talking,
King.
I thought that's the one you were going with, but then I was like,
Percy
oh,
Westcott.
Clancy Brown. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was a real son of a bitch too. You know, he was the guy that didn't set up the electric chair right, and he was a real coward and just a real shitty, evil weasel kind of a guy. But for me, I think more in that classic prison guard kind of way.
The tormentor.
I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave Clancy Brown off the list.
For sure.
So
Great choice.
He's my evil prison guard.
Yeah. I don't have an evil prison guard. It's hard to make that.
There's not a funny prison guard?
There's not a fun but inept prison guard that I could think of anyway. So in this case, what I went with instead at my number 2 was a group of police that definitely informed the Police Academy movies, but about a solid 70 or so years prior. And from 1912 to 1917, a series of movies were made with, of course, the Keystone Cops, right? The name itself is synonymous with police ineptitude. So Mack Sennett's Keystone Cops pictures are, pardon the pun, the key element in the Police Academy's movies' DNA. Bumbling through slapstick scenario after scenario, the Keystone Cops were usually featured as background characters in showcases for silent film era stars like Charlie Chaplin and Fatty Arbuckle. But in 1914, Chaplin starred as Keystone Cop himself in a one-reel 10-minute comedy caper called A Thief Catcher, which is my Keystone pick for this bottom 5, since we have to have one movie, right? So,
I mean, rules.
rules. But appearing at the 6-minute mark, Chaplin bosses everyone around before getting smacked in the face with a shovel in a gag typical of the cop shtick. The usual MO for these silent comedies was that the cops would show up as a gaggle in a skidding patrol car that would typically lose a few members of the squad during the way around some hairpin turns. And then they'd be outsmarted by some dimwit crooks, usually falling down like bowling pins when one of them is hit, or perhaps blowing themselves up while still in the police station. Clumsy, buffoonish, and cartoony, these cops are to this day the definition of sloppy police work. So to me, a solid entry at number 2 with the Keystone Cops.
Big time. Yeah, I'm glad you got it on there because I didn't go that route.
Yeah.
Well, for my number 1, I just could not skip The Killer Cop.
Oh, yeah.
Film has given us a lot of killer cops, and for my money, none have done it better than Bill Lustig's 1988 classic Maniac Cop, a movie about a killer ex-cop returned from the dead and seeking revenge on pretty much anyone with a pulse. It's a cult classic with an incredibly 80s cast. The Tom Atkins. I could walk away right there.
Yep,
Tom Atkins.
That's all you needed.
This movie. That's it.
He almost made my list for Night of the Creeps.
Yeah, sure. Oh, well, yeah, of course. Richard Roundtree, Bruce the Chin Campbell, and Robert, no, seriously, the fucking Chin Zadar.
Oh, yeah.
Any cop who can out-chin Bruce Campbell is on my radar. Robert Zadar, for those who don't know, is the 80s character actor with this huge jawline. It was a physical deformity, but he had this gigantic jaw. He played a lot of tough guys. He played a lot of heavies. And in this, he plays the cop that comes back from the dead and murders everybody. He kills 19 people in less than an hour and a half. That's one death almost every 4.5 minutes in Maniac Cop. And we're talking about like breaking necks, beating people to death, some real Bobby Zadar shit. Like not just hacking people up Jason Voorhees style. No, he gets pretty
He's
creative.
like he's got a meat grinders for paws, you know, like his fists are like
yep. Yeah. Some really great stunt work by Bruce Campbell in this movie. Bruce Campbell bails out of a truck that's like flying off a pier, and when you watch it, This is Bruce Campbell bailing out of a truck as it goes over the edge of the pier. I love Maniac Cop. It is so fun. Bill Lustig was a guy that just fucking loved making schlocky movies in the 1980s.
For sure.
And so for me, at number 1, I'm going with the classic Maniac Cop.
It's such a perfect pick for the Killer Cop. I mean, like, how can you get any better than Maniac Cop? It's perfect. I have Killer Cops at my number 1. It's the only pick that is a comedy but was kind of dark. And it was 1974's Freebie and the Bean. Even mentioning this flick makes the un-PC crowd get their collective Woody going. Because this is a crass, ugly, stupid, and to our current eyes, grossly racist and misogynistic, not to mention hobo and transphobic movie. You know, it's noisy and angry, and it's fucking asinine buddy cop movie. It's the kind of inverse of Blues Brothers, where we follow these two anti-hero cops instead of musicians who just rain little more than destruction in their wake while on a mission, not from God, but from one very apoplectic police chief, right? Its plot, if you could even suggest there is one, involves a mismatched pair of idiot cops, one named Freebie, who's a risk-taking moron who uses his badge for lightweight extortion, and the other named Bean, a Mexican-American. Yeah, so, yeah, right.
Good.
And they,
good.
yeah, right. And they punch and crash their way through the 1970s San Francisco while trying to protect a racketeer targeted for assassination. It's got 2 A-listers as Freebie and the Bean. Freebie's played by James Caan. Alan Arkin plays Bean, not Mexican-American, I might add. Neither is his wife, who's Valerie Harper.
Your thing was gone from the closet.
In the bathroom.
In the bathroom closet.
What thing is that?
Now, what thing?
The thing.
What thing? Tell me what thing.
The goddamn thing.
I keep a lot of things in there. My makeup, my lash curler.
Don't crap around
what are
with
you
me.
talking about?
You know exactly what I'm talking about. Your
it's not
thing was gone.
You have to tell me what thing.
They're busting out. Yeah, laugh your way out of that one, baby.
My douchebag?
Yeah.
I don't believe it.
Adam Arkin said it all in his summation of the movie when he was asked about it in a 1974 interview with People magazine. It's garbage. The movie is the template for dozens of buddy cop movies that followed, you know, like 48 Hours, Lethal Weapon, Bad Boys, some of the ones that you mentioned. But these two characters are kind of the worst. They're brain dead, punch first and ask questions later. They have zero interest in actually protecting and serving. And instead, they're always fretting about them getting theirs, whether it's pensions or sex or new coats or whatever else. There's all these stupid dialogue that goes on between Caan and Arkin. Most of it looks made up. It feels like poor improvisation. As far as movie cops go, these good guys are among the worst that I've ever been asked to tolerate or root for. You know, they're more cousins to Denzel Washington's crooked Training Day character than Eddie Murphy's Axel Foley, who, while a rule breaker, at least represented some level of moral compass throughout. Everything here is a joke or something to be taken lightly. And I kind of picked this one because I'm tired of when a movie like this gets pulled up and says, it's a forgotten classic when people knew how to make good humor.
Right, yeah. Back when it was cool to treat people like shit.
But now it's time to talk about movies that we definitely do like, our staff picks. Mike, what do you got for us this week?
Jason, I think I have a new favorite bad movie.
You mean out of all of the ones you've seen? You have a new...
This might be my new favorite bad movie.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
I saw it for the first time at the Coolidge Theater, presented by the American Genre Film Archive, which is this organization that's trying to bring some of these forgotten films back into the eyeballs of the movie-going population. It was presented by the guy that got me into bad movies in the first place, Mr. Joe Bob Briggs himself.
Nice.
I got to go to the Coolidge and see Joe Bob and watch 1988's The Brain, directed by a guy named Ed Hunt, who has done nothing. starring a guy named Tom Bresnahan, who went on to do nothing, but memorably a performance by David Gale, who we all know best as Dr. Hill from Reanimator, where he plays the reanimated severed head. He manages to have a reanimated severed head in this movie as well. The Brain, Jason, is a movie that has zero exposition. It is about this doctor, Dr. Anthony Blakey, who's got a television show that is sweeping this small town where it's called Independent Thought. He wants everybody to think for themselves. Meanwhile, there is a giant evil brain back in the lab that is sending brain waves through the television show, brainwashing everybody in town. The movie never fucking tells you why. It doesn't tell you what the brain's motivations are, what it comes from, what Dr. Blakely wants. Any of this shit doesn't matter. It's just there's a giant fucking brain. Everybody's in brainwashed in town. And poor Jim is now accused of being the town murderer, and everybody is chasing him all over this town. It is so much fucking fun. I mean, chase scenes where like the overweight orderly is like running on foot trying to catch a car, and the running on foot lasts a lot longer than it should, so that you can kind of see the actor running out of breath while he's running. Or chase scenes up and down the same flight of stairs a lot.
This sounds a lot like a dream. Are you sure this really happened? Because it sounds...
I'm positive. I saw it in a room full of other humans. It was so fun. It was everything I want in a bad movie. Cheesy performances, cheesy special effects, very light on plot. I knew exactly what was happening. There's an evil brain. It's taking over this town. So if you want like a really great, like this, I wish we had watched this in your basement back in the day. Cause
yeah, me too.
This is the ultimate, for me, bad movie night with friends. So 1988's The Brain. It is so much fun.
Man, did we go in totally separate directions with our staff picks this week?
Oh no.
In observance of the 25th anniversary of this movie's release, chose Contact.
Oh, okay. You love this movie more than anyone I know.
Look, there was a recent...
You're like...
No, there was a recent Vulture article detailing the long production history of the movie, which essentially took about 20 years to bring to the screen. I had no idea about any of that. As big a fan as I am of it, I had no clue how difficult the production history was for it, and how, you know, Linda Opes, the producer, at one point had lost the project, basically moving from one studio to another, only to later inherit it by chance. You know, it's just one of these strange Hollywood stories. And then to have George Miller, you know, the Mad Max, you know, Babe the Pig director, just he was attached and working on this film for quite some time, and then was fired by Warner Brothers and replaced by Zemeckis.
This morning's detection of an unidentified radio source from deep space can neither be confirmed nor denied.
Whatever it is, it ain't local.
Position?
I checked interferometry somewhere in Lyra, I think.
Vega?
Can't be. It's only 26 light years away.
I want all these people out of here. Your having sent this announcement all over the world may well constitute a breach of national security.
Boy, this isn't a person-to-person call. This may be an announcement to get our attention.
The president's called an emergency meeting.
You know those interlaced frames that we thought were noise? This has structure.
The one that always stands out for me in this cast of pretty big people is William Fichtner, who just brought a completely different side of his screen versatility as like a gentle, blind colleague of Ellie's with a sharp sense of hearing and just as sharp a sense of humor, because there's this one great, and I think it's an ad lib. I didn't see anything about this, but it feels like one. But at one point he walks in and he walks by James Woods' character and he says, "Nice to smell you again, Mr. Kitts." And James Woods looks caught off guard by it, and he's like, "You too," like that. And then he says something like, "Wouldn't have pegged him as a polo man," like as an aside. And it's just this great little bit, you know. The story was by Carl Sagan and his wife Ann Druyan, and it goes pretty heavy on science, but it goes even heavier on character. And it builds out a really compelling and, for me anyway, satisfying narrative that feels like a more logical way that quote unquote first contact might happen. It also balances issues of faith with the empiricism of science and the weird intersection between the two where the answers to questions are not always clear or rational. So the ending, of course, is much debated, and it's a pretty maligned finish as well that finds Ellie conversing with her father on a galactic beach. And I find it brainy and bold. But if you're looking for simple answers, maybe if you haven't seen this one already, just don't. Maybe sit it out.
It's a movie that I associate this movie with you. You're kind of a goddamn genius, Santo. Every now and again, you're like, here's this fucking thing that only I give a shit about. And then I watch it and I was like, God damn it, he's right. Again, he's right.
Mike, about a year ago, you made a little bit of bad cinema history yourself by earning last place in an annual tournament you helped create for another podcast. That tournament, which is firing up once again over at the Film Spotting podcast, is called Film Spotting Madness. Well, each year during Film Spotting Madness, you, Film Spotting hosts Josh Larson and Adam Kempenaar, and their producer, Sam Van Halgren, have a private competition going where the person with the winning bracket doesn't earn anything but bragging rights, but the loser, well, the loser has to watch the latest Adam Sandler movie. And usually it's some Netflix piece of junk, right? Because Happy Madison has some sort of production deal with Netflix that apparently has proved to be very lucrative. But in recent years, Sandler has been upping his game in fare like Uncut Gems and 2022's Hustle. So the decision was the loser had to watch the latest Happy Madison production. And oh my God, does it sound terrible. Mike, you lost big during that last Film Spotting Madness, so you're the one that got assigned Home Team. A cinematic debacle by definition, if ever there was one.
Yeah, the only thing worse than a shitty Adam Sandler comedy is a shitty Adam Sandler comedy that Adam Sandler isn't even in.
Yeah, Kevin
like
James,
so bad
right?
he's not. Yeah, I guess this is so. I don't know if it's based on real events or whatever.
It's the New Orleans
what
Saints,
I didn't know.
Sean Payton.
Kevin James as Coach Sean Payton, coaching his 6th grade football team. Jesus Christ. So here's the thing. Yes, for the first time in our podcast, you're not giving me a movie.
Nope.
Somebody else is. And so for next week's episode, I am going to pay the dealer and watch Home Team starring Kevin James and for some goddamn reason, Taylor Lautner. Rob Schneider. This might be our first step into the Schneiderverse.
Yeah, the Schneiderverse. Oh my God.
I don't know.
So, Mike, all that said, then what are we doing for the bottom 5? What do you think? I'm thinking bottom 5 teams. Big brain. Yeah. Big brain here.
We're swinging for the fences. Look, if I got to watch this movie, it doesn't mean I got to bring the Thunder on the bottom 5, right? Bottom 5 Sean Payton biopics that Adam Sandler ran the fuck away from that I had to watch because of losing a bet. Go. No, yeah. Bottom 5 teams.
Bottom 5 teams is the easiest thing that we could do.
I don't know if we're going to stick to just sports teams.
I wouldn't. I can tell you right now, I'm not going to.
Maybe I'll try. I don't know. Maybe I'll try.
We'll see. Yeah.
Either way, I'm looking forward to this. I think it's a fun thing that is happening to me. And I look forward to sending it over to the guys over at Film Spotting and having their crowd listen in and hopefully maybe come over and check us out as well. That would be cool. So I hope that everybody will come back and join us when I will be reviewing Home Team. Until then, we have been your hosts. I am Mike.
And I am Jay.
We'll see you next time.
Stop Mislim na te, hoću znat sve kate, vježbaću sate i sate. Karate, nehoću dok zadnji mi kjaj zostane iza te.
Getting Gutenbergy with it. I was like Gutenbergy with it. Na 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 na. Gutenbergy with it. Na 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 na. Gutenbergy with it.
We're gonna get sued.